Hello, I'm Tim Smith with the Adams County Historical Society, and welcome to another Tim's Top 10. And in this episode, what I decided to do was talk about 10 books that were written by men who were involved in the battle. And again, people are always asking me about my favorite book, about this subject or that subject. And oftentimes people ask me, what is my favorite book on the Battle of Gettysburg? And that's a really tough question to answer. And I usually tell them the best books on the Battle of Gettysburg are the ones that are written by the people who participated in the battle. So instead of reading what someone else thinks about what happened here, I prefer to read what the people who were involved in the battle thought about what was happening to them at the moment. And, you know, I understand that when you read some of these accounts by these people, that they're looking back on what happened, and no one writes, I was a coward and I ran, or I was scared to death, or I made a horrible mistake and thousands of men died because of it. So, you know, there's a sense when you're reading the accounts of the soldiers involved in the fighting, especially those in command, that they might not exactly always be truthful. But still, comparing the accounts of the soldiers themselves and trying to make sense of them when put together into a large puzzle is really one of the greatest joys that historians of the battle have. So my favorite book on the battle is the official reports. So the individual official reports of the Union and Confederate soldiers, you know, commanders that were here involved in the battle. And of course, this is part 1, volume 27, and this is mostly the northern official reports of the battle. You probably know Gettysburg is volume 27, part 1, 2, and 3. So you can read that. And of course, you know, John Batchelder, who was actually a government historian hired after the American Civil War and a member of the Gettysburg National Military Park Commission, he compiled correspondence with Union and Confederate commanders and regular soldiers concerning the events that occurred in the battle. And most of his correspondence was held at the New Hampshire Historical Society and was reprinted in the Batchelder papers, which I understand has been reprinted again recently by Savas and Beatty in California, so you could buy those. And these are filled with letters written to him about commanders in the battle and their experiences. Just great stuff. But on our list for the top 10, if you don't agree with any of the ones I chose, or if you have another one that you would prefer be one of the top 10, feel free to put it in the comments, and I'll look at what everybody says. But number 10, The Battle of Gettysburg by Jesse Bowman Young. So this man was in the 84th Pennsylvania Infantry. And yes, that unit was not on the firing line on July 2nd with the rest of their brigade on the Emmitsburg Road. They were guarding the wagon train, but he was a participant in the Gettysburg campaign. After the Civil War, he actually moved to Gettysburg, was the Methodist minister here at our church, and while he served his congregation, he collected material and wrote a book about the battle. So this is written by a guy who's living in Gettysburg, who was involved in the Battle of Gettysburg, and it's just very enjoyable to read. Number 9, I picked The Regimental History of the 150th Pennsylvania Volunteers, the Bucktails. And This was written by Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Chamberlain. And although it's a regimental history of the 150th Pennsylvania, it tells you about their entire service. It has a huge Gettysburg section and lots of stories about the Battle of Gettysburg. And I particularly like that when you read a regimental history about the whole war, but it has a nice big meaty section about their losses at Gettysburg. And I got to tell you, I noticed right away that my stack here is first day of the battle heavy. And, you know, if anybody asks me, my favorite day of the battle to read about is July 1st. I've always been into July 1st. And particularly Robinson's division. So here's the history of the 97th New York by Isaac Hall, the Conklin Rifles. And it has an excellent overview of the events that occurred in this unit before and during, before and after the Battle of Gettysburg, but especially has a nice section on the fighting along Oak Ridge on July 1st with the 97th New York. And this really opened my eyes up to the struggle between Robinson's division and Iverson's brigade on July 1st. So I really like that. And number 7, The War Between the Union and the Confederacy by William C. Oates. And of course, you might know that William C. Oates is the commander of the 15th Alabama, and his unit fought against the 20th Maine and Joshua Chamberlain on July 2nd. And of course, I do not have Joshua Chamberlain in here as part of my list, and I'm sure many people are like, how could you do that? Because, you know, it's just a bunch of 20th Maine misinformation anyway. I'm not a big fan of Joshua Chamberlain. So if you are, though, why don't you read William C. Oates's book in which he details the fight against the 20th Maine on July 2nd. And I especially love the campaign section and how they go up and over Big Round Top. And of course, this, if you watched our Big Round Top video, is where we talk about Gibraltar and the concept of turning Big Round Top into a defensive position on July 2nd. So, and it's just a very good book with just lots of detail about the Army of Northern Virginia and the Confederate Army during the war. So I tried to be balanced when reading about it, although I'm a Northerner. Also, another Southerner, I really like this book, and it came out not too long ago, Campbell Brown's Civil War by Terry Jones. So I had read some of the Campbell Brown papers that were available prior to this. The Park Service Library had them, and they had made copies of them. But Terry Jones went around and found all the letters and correspondence and papers from Campbell Brown and put them together in one concise, readable form. So Campbell Brown is the stepson of General Richard Ewell, and he's on Richard Ewell's staff at Gettysburg. And since Ewell, we don't have much information written by him about the battle, and since he plays such a critical role in the invasion and the fighting on July 1st, and since he takes a lot of flack for his perceived non-attack on Cemetery Hill on the evening of July 1st, this is just a remarkable source that fills in a lot of information on Ewell and his activities at Gettysburg. And I'm a big fan of this book, and if you want to know more about the especially Ewell's involvement in the battle, commands 1/3 of the Confederate Army, it's just a really sensational book. So it's 10, 9, 8, 7, that was 6. Number 5, I picked A Diary of Battle by Charles Wainwright. So Charles Wainwright is an artillery commander associated with the 1st Army Corps Artillery at the Battle of Gettysburg. But, he served in the Army of the Potomac, and his journals are very extensive and go throughout the entire war. And I think I like this book most because he's highly opinionated. He just doesn't like people. And so he'll just rip into someone and just let you know what he's thinking. And there's just something really fascinating about that. Like he's the one who complains about General Warren and says that he's the most profane man in the entire Northern Army. Just always cussing up a storm. And just there's particularly interesting things about East Cemetery Hill and the first day of the battle. And also, it's the war through an artilleryman's perspective. So I recommend that. Okay, so number 4, what did I pick for number 4? Oh, I can't believe this only made 4. One of my favorite books on the Battle of Gettysburg, Service with the 6th Wisconsin by Rufus Dawes. And Rufus Dawes is just an amazing individual. You probably know his grandfather, is famous for riding, in the other direction with Paul Revere in the American Revolution. His son was vice president of the United States. But it's just a really good book, and it has a very lengthy section on the Battle of Gettysburg and the heavy fighting that occurred on July 1st, 1863. And of course, the 6th Wisconsin charged against the railroad cut on July 1st. On July 2nd and 3rd, Rufus Dawes was also involved in the fighting on Culp's Hill. So we have that also. And, I remember that I was involved in a project with the History Channel, and I was one of their advisors, and they did a documentary on Gettysburg. And we went back and forth with the people that were creating the series, and they chose Rufus Dawes as one of their main characters based on my recommendation. And also, I remember Scott Hartwig wholeheartedly approved and wanted this to be part of the show. But it's, I know it's called Gettysburg. I can't remember exactly the subtitle, but if you see a documentary on History Channel with Rufus Dawes, it's based a lot on this book, and I recommend that. So, number 3, Rags and Hopes. And this is a book written by a member of the Texas Brigade at Gettysburg, and it's the reminiscence of Valorous Cincinnatus Giles. And it's actually published by his granddaughter, and it's his memoirs. And, I just love the way it's written and his approach. And he is definitely one that tells you what he is thinking and doesn't hold anything back. He mentions after the heavy fighting on Little Round Top on July 2nd, at Gettysburg that night, it was about 7 devils to each man. Every characteristic of the human race was presented there. And he talks about different characteristics. And then he says, a little red paint and a few eagle feathers were all that was necessary to make the crowd on both sides into the most veritable savages on earth. White-winged peace did not roost on Little Round Top that night. There was not a man there that cared a snap for the golden rule or that could have remembered one line of the Lord's Prayer. Both sides were whipped and all were mad about it. I just remember there's just passage after passage that is very, very well written in this. And again, this is just a normal, everyday soldier in the battle that you could read about. Number 2, for me, is Gettysburg, the Pivotal Battle of the Civil War by Robert Beecham. Now, he's in the 2nd Wisconsin, and again, very first day of the battle, heavy here. But his firsthand account of the fighting in McPherson's Woods or Herbst Woodlot, and then back at the Lutheran Seminary, I quote from this over and over again in my Lee's Headquarters book in my chapter on the battle around Seminary Ridge. And you can generally pick this up, original copy of it online or again on the Internet Archives. And number one, and I expect other people will have different number ones, but I've read a lot of books on the Battle of Gettysburg, and I think the best written account of the battle by someone who was in the battle is Abner Doubleday's Chancellorsville and Gettysburg. He did a lot of research when he wrote the Gettysburg section of this book. And in the first day of the battle section, he is a major player in the first day. And the way that he lays out the first day's fighting from Beaufort through Reynolds to his command to General Howard's arrival is just spectacular. Also, this particular book you can buy or acquire. I think I got mine from free on a book on tape where somebody reads it to you and you can actually listen to the audio of it. But highly recommend this book. Well, again, if you have books that you think should be on the list, if you want to put Joshua Chambers Through Blood and Fire on this list, go ahead. There's other articles that are kind of small booklets written by commanders in the battle that probably be very good for this list, like Evander Law's account in Battles and Leaders of the Civil War, or Henry Hunt's account, which also is in Battles and Leaders of the Civil War, or General Howard's account of the Battle of Gettysburg, or Carl Schur's, that's another one, or Frank Haskell's lengthy letter written on the battle is probably a really good account. So let me know in the comments. And remember, if you like the content we put on our YouTube channel, please like and subscribe. And check out our website in the description here for GettysburgFilmFestival.org. And come out to the film festival and see notable historians, filmmakers, and actors such as Ken Burns.